Rejected by her own children, she could have given up, but she found a strength that led to an incredible turnaround. You may think this is just another story of abandonment, but what she did will inspire you in ways you couldn't imagine. Before we continue, leave a comment below telling me where you're watching this video from. I'd love to know. In the heart of suburban New Jersey, where manicured lawns stretched like emerald carpets and towering mansions stood as testaments to material success, lived Clara Hartley. At 55 years old, Clara was a woman who seemed to have it all, at least on the surface. Her sprawling estate, with its marble fountains and meticulously tended rose gardens, was the envy of the neighborhood. The gleaming luxury cars that lined her circular driveway spoke of wealth beyond measure. Yet behind the ornate doors of her palatial home, Clara's world was crumbling. On a crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves danced in the breeze outside her window, Clara stood in her cavernous living room, surrounded by priceless artwork and antique furniture. Her gaze fell upon a family portrait hanging above the fireplace, a reminder of happier times. In the photograph, taken over a decade ago, Clara's smile was genuine, her eyes sparkling with joy as she stood surrounded by her 3 children, Emma, Ryan, and Michael. Now that portrait served only to amplify the deafening silence that echoed through the empty halls of her home. Clara's fingers trembled as she reached out to touch the cold glass of the frame, tracing the outlines of her children's faces. How had it come to this? How had she, Clara Hartley, once the beating heart of a loving family, become a stranger to her own flesh and blood? The weight of her loneliness pressed down upon her shoulders like a physical force, threatening to crush her spirit entirely. Clara's once vibrant blue eyes, now dulled by years of silent suffering, scanned the room. Every luxurious item, from the crystal chandeliers to the imported silk rugs, seemed to mock her. These possessions, acquired through years of relentless ambition and hard work, now felt hollow and meaningless. With a heavy sigh, Clara sank into a plush armchair, her mind drifting back to the pivotal moments that had led her to this point of isolation. She remembered the late nights at the office, the missed recitals, the forgotten birthdays, all sacrificed on the altar of success. At the time, she had justified every absence, every broken promise, with the belief that she was securing a better future for her family. But now, surrounded by the trappings of wealth yet bereft of the warmth of familial love, Clara realized the terrible price of her choices. Her children, once so eager for her attention and affection, had grown distant over the years. What began as disappointed sighs and hurt looks had evolved into cold silences and outright rejection. Clara's attempts at reconnection, lavish gifts, offers of financial support, even desperate pleas for a simple phone call, were met with an impenetrable wall of indifference. The harsh reality of her situation had never been more apparent than during last Thanksgiving's ill-fated family gathering. Clara had spent weeks preparing, hoping that the holiday spirit might soften her children's hearts. She had personally cooked all of their favorite dishes, decorated the house with care, and even hired a professional photographer to capture what she hoped would be a turning point in their relationship. But as the evening wore on, the tension in the air grew thick enough to cut with a knife. Conversation was stilted, smiles were forced, and Clara's attempts at reminiscing about happier times were met with stony silence. It was during a moment when she had stepped away to refill the wine glasses that she overheard a conversation that would haunt her for months to come. "I can't believe we're even here." Emma's voice drifted from the dining room, laced with bitterness. "It's not like she ever cared enough to show up for us when it mattered." "You know, Mom," Ryan's deeper tone responded, dripping with sarcasm, "always trying to buy our love, as if another fancy dinner can make up for years of neglect." Michael, the youngest, chimed in with a snort. "At least the food's good, probably the only thing she's ever put effort into for us." Clara's hand had frozen on the wine bottle, her heart shattering into a million pieces. The glasses clinked together as her body began to tremble, betraying her presence. The conversation in the other room abruptly ceased, replaced by an awkward shuffle of feet and cleared throats. When Clara had finally mustered the strength to return to the dining room, she was met with 3 pairs of eyes that couldn't quite meet her gaze. A mixture of guilt and defiance etched on her children's faces. That night, After her children had departed with half-hearted hugs and promises to keep in touch that rang hollow, Clara had broken down. She wept until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen, the weight of her failures as a mother crushing her soul. It was a pivotal moment, one that forced her to confront the harsh truth she had been avoiding for years. Her pursuit of success had cost her the most precious thing in life, the love and connection of her family. In the weeks that followed, Clara's isolation intensified. The sprawling mansion, once a symbol of her achievements, now felt like a gilded cage. Every room held memories of happier times, ghostly echoes of children's laughter and family dinners that now existed only in her mind. She wandered from room to room like a specter, touching photographs and mementos, desperately trying to reconnect with a past that seemed forever out of reach. Her days blurred together, a monotonous cycle of waking, going through the motions of living, and falling into fitful sleep plagued by dreams of what could have been. Clara's attempts to reach out to her children grew more frequent and increasingly desperate. She left voicemails that went unreturned, sent emails that remained unread, and even resorted to sending extravagant gifts that were either returned or acknowledged with terse, formal thank you notes. Each rejection felt like a knife twisting in her heart, deepening the wound of her loneliness. Clara began to withdraw from the world entirely. She declined invitations to social events, stopped attending the charity galas that had once been a staple of her calendar, and even neglected her appearance. The woman who had once been the epitome of success and sophistication now spent her days in a haze of regret and self-recrimination. It was on a particularly bleak evening, as rain lashed against the windows and thunder rumbled in the distance, that Clara reached her breaking point. She stood in her bedroom, surrounded by the trappings of luxury that now felt suffocating. Her gaze fell upon a framed magazine cover, featuring her triumphant smile and the bold headline, "Clara Hartley, the woman who has it all." In a moment of raw anguish, Clara lashed out, sweeping the frame off the dresser. It crashed to the floor, glass shattering and scattering across the polished hardwood. As she stared at the broken pieces, Clara saw a perfect metaphor for her life, shattered, fragmented, and impossible to put back together. She sank to her knees, unmindful of the glass shards cutting into her skin, and let out a gut-wrenching sob. Years of pent-up emotion poured out of her in a torrent of tears and anguished cries. Clara wept for the mother she had failed to be, for the moments she had missed, for the love she had taken for granted. She wept until she had no tears left, until her throat was raw and her body shook with exhaustion. As the storm outside began to subside, Clara found herself sprawled on the floor, emotionally and physically drained. In that moment of utter desolation, she made a silent vow to herself. If there was any chance, any possibility of redemption, she would seize it. She would do whatever it took to mend the broken bonds with her children, even if it meant dismantling every aspect of the life she had built. Little did Clara know that fate was about to intervene, offering her a glimmer of hope in the most unexpected of places. The following morning, feeling hollowed out and desperate for a change of scenery, Clara ventured out of her self-imposed exile. She found herself at a quaint little cafe in town, a place she had never bothered to visit before. As she nursed a cup of coffee, staring blankly at the bustling street outside, a familiar voice cut through her melancholy. "Clara? Clara Hartley, is that you?" Looking up, Clara's eyes met those of Marcia Bloom, an old acquaintance from her college days. Marcia's warm smile faltered as she took in Clara's disheveled appearance, and the deep sadness etched into her features. "My goodness, Clara, I hardly recognized you," Marcia said, her voice laced with concern. "Are you all right?" For a moment, Clara considered brushing off the question with a practiced smile and a dismissive wave. It was what she had always done, maintaining the facade of the successful, put-together woman she was expected to be. But something in Marcia's genuine concern broke through Clara's defenses. "No," Clara whispered, her voice cracking. "No, I'm not all right at all." Marcia slid into the seat across from Clara, reaching out to clasp her hand. "Tell me," she said simply, her eyes filled with compassion. And so, for the first time in years, Clara opened up. The words poured out of her like a dam bursting, a torrent of pain, regret, and longing. She spoke of her children's estrangement, of the hollow victory her success had become, of the crushing loneliness that threatened to suffocate her. Marcia listened without judgment, offering quiet words of encouragement when Clara's voice faltered. As Clara's story came to an end, Marcia squeezed her hand gently. "Oh, Clara," she said softly, "I'm so sorry you've been carrying this burden alone. But you know, you're not the only one who's struggled with this. There's a support group that meets at the community center for parents who are estranged from their children. I think it might help you to talk to others who understand what you're going through." Clara's initial reaction was to recoil from the suggestion. The idea of airing her private pain in front of strangers seemed unbearable. But as she looked into Marcia's kind eyes, she felt a tiny spark of hope ignite in her chest. "Do you really think it could help?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcia nodded emphatically. "I've seen it change lives, Clara. It won't be easy, but it could be the first step towards healing, for you and for your family." With trembling hands, Clara accepted the information for the support group. As she left the cafe that day, she felt a shift within her. The path ahead was uncertain and undoubtedly difficult, but for the first time in years, Clara felt a flicker of hope. The day of the support group meeting arrived, and Clara found herself sitting in her car in the community center parking lot, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. Every instinct screamed at her to drive away, to retreat to the safety of her isolated existence. But the memory of her children's laughter, of the love they once shared, gave her the courage to step out of the car and walk towards the building. As Clara entered the meeting room, she was struck by how ordinary it looked. There were no plush seats or expensive decorations, just a circle of simple chairs and a table with coffee and cookies. The people gathering were equally unremarkable, men and women of various ages, all bearing the same look of quiet pain that Clara recognized from her own mirror. Clara took a seat, her heart pounding. As the meeting began and people started to share their stories, she felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. Here, in this room, she wasn't Clara Hartley, the successful businesswoman. She was simply a mother, hurting and hoping for reconciliation. When it came time for Clara to speak, she found the words coming more easily than she expected. She spoke of her regrets, her fears, and her desperate desire to reconnect with her children. As she talked, she saw nods of understanding and heard murmurs of empathy from around the circle. One woman, Barbara, shared a story that resonated deeply with Clara. "I was so focused on providing for my kids," Barbara said, her voice thick with emotion, "that I forgot to actually be there for them. By the time I realized my mistake, they were grown and wanted nothing to do with me. But I'm learning that it's never too late to try and make things right." Clara felt tears streaming down her face as she listened to Barbara and others share their journeys of healing and reconciliation. Some had successfully rebuilt relationships with their children, while others were still in the process. But all of them spoke of the power of self-reflection, of learning to truly listen, and of the patience required to earn back trust. As the meeting drew to a close, Clara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She wasn't alone in her struggle, and more importantly, there was hope. The path to reconciliation wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. In the weeks that followed, Clara threw herself into the process of self-improvement with the same determination that had once driven her career. She continued attending the support group meetings, finding strength and wisdom in the shared experiences of others. But Clara knew that healing had to start from within. She began seeing a therapist, delving into the root causes of her workaholic tendencies, and learning to address the deep-seated insecurities that had driven her relentless pursuit of success. As she worked on herself, Clara also started to look outward. She realized that her focus on material success had not only cost her her family, but had also disconnected her from her community. Inspired by stories she heard at the support group, Clara decided to start volunteering at a local homeless shelter. Her first day at the shelter was eye-opening. Clara, who had always viewed her wealth as a shield against the world's hardships, found herself face-to-face with people who had lost everything. As she served meals and listened to their stories, she felt a profound shift in her perspective. One afternoon, as Clara was helping to sort through donated clothing, she struck up a conversation with a young woman named Tessa. Tessa had fled an abusive relationship with her two young children and was trying to rebuild her life. "I don't have much," Tessa said, her eyes shining with determination. "But I have my kids, and that's everything. We may be sleeping on cots in a shelter, but every night I get to hold them close and tell them I love them. That's worth more than any mansion or fancy car." Tessa's words hit Clara like a physical blow. Here was a woman who had next to nothing in material terms, yet she possessed the very thing Clara had sacrificed everything to lose: the love and closeness of her children. That night, Clara sat down at her desk and, with shaking hands, began to write. She penned 3 letters, one to each of her children. In them, she poured out her heart, acknowledging her past mistakes without making excuses. She expressed her deep regret for prioritizing her career over her family and her sincere desire to make amends. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness," she wrote, "but I'm asking for a chance to show you that I've changed, that I understand now what truly matters in life. I don't expect things to be fixed overnight, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes, for as long as it takes, to earn back your trust and be the mother you always deserved." Clara sealed each letter with a tear and a prayer, then dropped them in the mailbox before she could lose her nerve. The days that followed were some of the most anxiety-filled of her life. Every time the phone rang or an email notification popped up, her heart would race. But as days turned into weeks with no response, Clara's hope began to fade. Still, she pressed on. She continued her volunteer work, finding a sense of purpose in helping others that she had never experienced in her corporate success. She kept attending her support group and therapy sessions, working through her issues and learning to forgive herself, even as she hoped for her children's forgiveness. It was on a crisp autumn evening, nearly 2 months after she had sent the letters, that Clara's phone buzzed with a text message. Her hands trembled as she read the words on the screen. "Mom, it's Emma. I got your letter. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I'm willing to meet. Coffee next Saturday?" Clara's vision blurred with tears as she read and reread the message. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even a promise of reconciliation. But it was something she had begun to think impossible: a chance. The meeting with Emma was set for a small, neutral cafe, not the one where Clara had reconnected with Marcia, but a similar establishment with a cozy, unpretentious atmosphere. Clara arrived early, her nerves frayed and her heart pounding. She had agonized over what to wear, not wanting to appear as though she was trying too hard, but also not wanting to seem careless. In the end, she had settled on a simple blouse and slacks, a far cry from the power suits that had once been her armor. As Clara sat at a small table by the window, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup, she spotted Emma walking towards the cafe. Her daughter, now 32 years old, moved with a grace and confidence that made Clara's heart swell with pride and ache with regret for all the years she had missed. Emma paused at the door, her hand on the handle, and for a heart-stopping moment, Clara feared she might turn and leave. But then Emma squared her shoulders and entered, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on Clara. "Hi, Mom," Emma said softly as she approached the table. Clara stood, fighting the urge to pull her daughter into an embrace. "Emma," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for coming." They sat across from each other, an awkward silence settling between them as Emma ordered her coffee. Clara took a deep breath, reminding herself of all she had learned in therapy and at the support group. This wasn't about her needs or her guilt. It was about listening to Emma, truly hearing her for perhaps the first time. "I got your letter," Emma began, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. "I have to admit I almost threw it away without reading it, but something made me open it." Clara nodded, staying silent, giving Emma the space to continue. "You hurt us, Mom," Emma said, her voice quivering slightly. "For years we felt like we were never enough, like your work was always more important than us. Do you know how many times I sat in the audience at my dance recitals, scanning the crowd for your face only to realize you weren't there? Or how Ryan would make excuses for you at his football games? Or how Michael would cry himself to sleep on his birthdays because you were always too busy to celebrate with him?" Each word was like a knife to Clara's heart, but she forced herself to listen, to really hear the pain in her daughter's voice. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them back, knowing she had no right to cry when faced with the consequences of her actions. "I know," Clara said softly when Emma paused. "I know, and I'm so, so sorry. I can't change the past, Emma, but I want you to know that I understand now how terribly I failed you all. My priorities were completely wrong, and I missed out on the most important things in life because of it." Emma's eyes narrowed slightly, a mix of suspicion and hope flickering across her face. "Your letter mentioned changes you've been making. What did you mean by that?" Clara took a deep breath and began to share. She told Emma about the support group, about her therapy sessions, and about her volunteer work at the shelter. She spoke of the realizations she'd had, the hard truths she'd faced about herself and her choices. "I'm not telling you this to make excuses or to ask for your pity," Clara said earnestly. "I'm sharing it because I want you to know that I'm committed to change, not just in words, but in actions. I know I have a lot to make up for, and I know it will take time to rebuild your trust, if you're willing to give me that chance." Emma was quiet for a long moment, her fingers wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. When she spoke, her voice was soft but firm. "I appreciate your honesty, Mom, and I can see that you're making an effort. But you're right. It will take time. I can't just forget all those years of feeling neglected and unimportant." Clara nodded, her heart heavy but also lightened by the fact that Emma was even willing to have this conversation. "I understand," she said. "I'm willing to take whatever time you need. Maybe we could start small. A phone call once a week or lunch once a month?" Emma considered this, then gave a small nod. "I think I could do that. Lunch once a month. But Mom," she added, her gaze intense, "I need you to understand that I'm not making any promises. I'm willing to try, but if at any point I feel like this isn't working or it's too much, I reserve the right to step back." "Of course," Clara agreed quickly. "Emma, the fact that you're willing to give me this chance means more to me than I can express. I promise you, I will do everything in my power to be the mother you deserve." As they finished their coffee, the conversation turned to lighter topics. Emma shared a little about her job as a graphic designer, and Clara listened with genuine interest, asking questions and marveling at her daughter's talents. When it was time to leave, Clara stood, uncertain whether a hug would be welcome. Emma hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward and gave Clara a brief, slightly awkward embrace. It wasn't the warm, lingering hugs they had shared when Emma was a child, but to Clara, it felt like the most precious gift in the world. As Emma walked away, Clara remained standing outside the cafe, watching her daughter's retreating figure. Her heart was full of a mixture of hope, gratitude, and determination. This meeting was just the first small step on a long journey, but it was more than she had dared to hope for just a few months ago. Clara knew that rebuilding her relationship with Emma, and hopefully in time, with Ryan and Michael as well, would be a challenging process. There would be setbacks, difficult conversations, and moments of doubt. But as she walked back to her car, Clara felt a sense of purpose and resolve that had been missing from her life for far too long. That evening, as Clara sat in her home office, a room that had once been the command center for her business empire, she found herself looking at it with new eyes. The awards and accolades that lined the walls now seemed hollow, meaningless compared to the brief hug Emma had given her that afternoon. With a sudden burst of energy, Clara began to take down the plaques and trophies. She carefully wrapped each one and placed them in boxes, not to display them proudly, but to store them away. As the walls became bare, Clara felt as though she was shedding an old skin, making room for a new version of herself to emerge. In place of the awards, Clara hung a single photograph, an old picture of herself with all three of her children, taken on a rare family vacation when they were young. Their smiles were genuine, their eyes bright with happiness. Clara touched the photo gently, a silent promise to do whatever it took to bring that joy back into their lives. Over the next few weeks, Clara threw herself into her new routine with the same dedication she had once given to her career. She continued her volunteer work at the shelter, finding a deep sense of fulfillment in helping others that no business deal had ever provided. She attended her support group meetings regularly, drawing strength from the shared experiences of others and offering her own insights to those just beginning their journey of reconciliation. Her weekly therapy sessions became a cornerstone of her personal growth. With her therapist's guidance, Clara delved deep into the roots of her workaholic tendencies, confronting the insecurities and fears that had driven her relentless pursuit of success. She learned to recognize the patterns of behavior that had pushed her children away and worked hard to develop new, healthier ways of expressing love and care. As promised, Clara and Emma met for lunch once a month. Each meeting was a delicate dance of reconnection, filled with moments of warmth and lingering awkwardness. Clara was careful not to push too hard, allowing Emma to set the pace of their renewed relationship. She listened more than she spoke, savoring every detail Emma shared about her life and interests. It was during their third monthly lunch that Emma hesitantly brought up her brothers. "Ryan and Michael know we've been meeting," she said, stirring her iced tea absently. "They're curious, I guess. Skeptical, but curious." Clara's heart leapt at the mention of her sons, but she kept her voice calm. "How are they doing?" she asked, genuinely wanting to know about their lives. Emma gave a small smile. "They're okay. Ryan just got a promotion at work, and Michael's thinking about going back to school for his master's degree." Clara nodded, feeling a pang of sadness at how little she knew about her own children's lives. "That's wonderful," she said softly. "I'm so proud of them both." Emma studied her mother's face for a moment. "You know, Mom, they might be open to hearing from you, if you wanted to reach out to them, I mean." Clara felt a surge of hope, but she tempered it with caution. "Do you think that would be okay? I don't want to pressure them if they're not ready." "I can't promise how they'll react," Emma said honestly, "but I've told them about the changes I've seen in you. I think they might be willing to give you a chance, like I did." That evening, Clara sat at her desk, staring at her phone. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked it up, scrolling to Ryan's number. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the call button before she could lose her nerve. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Clara's heart pounded in her chest, and she was about to hang up when suddenly she heard a familiar voice. "Hello?" "Ryan?" Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's Mom." There was a long pause, and Clara could hear Ryan's breathing on the other end of the line. Finally, he spoke, his voice guarded but not hostile. "Hi, Mom. Emma said you might call." "I hope that's okay," Clara said quickly. "I don't want to intrude if you're not comfortable talking to me." Another pause. Then Ryan's voice came again, softer this time. "No, it's okay. How are you?" As they began to talk, Clara felt a glimmer of hope spark in her chest. The conversation was awkward at times, filled with long pauses and careful words, but it was a start. Ryan agreed to meet her for coffee the following week, and as Clara hung up the phone, she felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement coursing through her veins. The meeting with Ryan was more challenging than her first encounter with Emma. Ryan, always the more volatile of her children, struggled to contain his anger and hurt. There were moments when his voice rose, his accusations cutting Clara to the quick. But she sat there, accepting his pain, acknowledging her failures without making excuses. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away, Ryan," Clara said softly, after he had vented years of pent-up frustration. "I don't even know if I deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know that I'm here now, and I'm listening, really listening. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to be part of your life again, if you'll let me." Ryan's anger seemed to deflate, replaced by a weariness that made him look older than his years. "I don't know, Mom," he said, running a hand through his hair. "It's not that simple. You can't just walk back into our lives and expect everything to be okay." "I know," Clara nodded, fighting back tears. "I know it's not simple, and I know it will take time. But Ryan, I love you. I've always loved you, even when I was too blind to show it properly. All I'm asking for is a chance to prove that to you." As they parted ways that day, Ryan didn't offer a hug like Emma had, but he did agree to keep in touch. It was a small victory, but to Clara, it felt monumental. Michael, the youngest, was the last to agree to meet. His resistance was the most passive. He didn't express anger like Ryan or cautious openness like Emma. Instead, he simply remained distant, responding to Clara's attempts at contact with brief, non-committal messages. It was Emma who finally convinced Michael to give their mother a chance. "Just meet her once," Emma had pleaded. "See for yourself if she's really changed. You don't have to decide anything right away." And so, on a blustery Saturday afternoon, Clara found herself sitting across from her youngest child in a small bookstore cafe. Michael had always been the most sensitive of her children, the one who felt her absence most keenly. Now, as a young man of 26, he regarded her with a mixture of wariness and longing that broke Clara's heart. "I've missed so much of your life, Michael," Clara said softly, fighting the urge to reach out and touch his hand. "I know I can never get that time back, but if you're willing, I'd love to hear about what you've been doing, what you're passionate about now." Michael was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee absently. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Why now, Mom? Why, after all these years, do you suddenly want to be part of our lives?" Clara took a deep breath, knowing that her answer to this question could make or break any chance of reconnecting with her son. "It's not sudden, Michael," she said carefully. "It's the result of a long, painful process of realizing how terribly wrong my priorities were. I've spent the past few months in therapy and support groups, really looking at myself and the choices I've made, and I've come to understand that all the success in the world means nothing if you don't have love and connection in your life." She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. "I know I hurt you, Michael. I know I missed so many important moments in your life, and I will regret that until the day I die. But I also know that I love you, that I've always loved you, even when I was too caught up in my own ambitions to show it properly. I'm here now, asking for a chance to be the mother you always deserved. Not because I expect forgiveness, or because I think I can make up for lost time, but because I want to be part of your life now and in the future, if you'll let me." Michael's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he listened to his mother's words. For a long moment he said nothing, and Clara held her breath, fearing she had said too much or not enough. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want to believe you, Mom. I really do. But I'm scared. Scared of letting you in only to be hurt again." Clara felt her own eyes fill with tears. "I understand that fear, Michael. And I want you to know that it's okay to be cautious, to take things slow. I'm not asking for everything to be perfect overnight. I'm just asking for a chance to prove to you, day by day, that I'm committed to being the mother you need and deserve." As their conversation continued, Michael slowly began to open up. He told Clara about his work as a graphic designer, about his dreams of starting his own design studio someday. Clara listened with rapt attention, asking thoughtful questions and expressing genuine interest in every aspect of Michael's life. By the time they parted ways, there was a tentative warmth between them. Michael didn't make any promises, but he agreed to keep in touch, to give this fragile new connection a chance to grow. As Clara drove home that evening, she felt a mixture of emotions washing over her. There was hope, yes, but also a deep sense of responsibility. She knew that rebuilding relationships with her children would be a long, challenging process. There would be setbacks, difficult conversations, and moments of doubt. But as she pulled into her driveway, Clara felt a sense of purpose that had been missing from her life for far too long. She no longer measured her worth by the size of her bank account or the prestige of her business deals. Instead, she found value in the small steps she was taking to reconnect with her children, in the lives she was touching through her volunteer work, and in the personal growth she was experiencing every day. Clara entered her house, which no longer felt like an empty mausoleum to her success. Instead, it was becoming a home again, filled with the promise of family gatherings and shared laughter. She walked to her study, where the walls were now adorned with family photos instead of business awards. Sitting at her desk, Clara opened her journal, a practice her therapist had recommended. She began to write, pouring out her thoughts and feelings about the day's meeting with Michael, her hopes for the future, and her commitment to continuing on this path of healing and reconciliation. As she wrote, Clara felt a sense of peace settling over her. The journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in years, she felt truly alive, truly connected to what mattered most in life. With each word she penned, each memory she revisited, Clara recommitted herself to the path of love, forgiveness, and genuine connection. The weeks turned into months, and slowly but surely, Clara's relationships with her children began to heal. It wasn't always smooth sailing. There were arguments, moments of old resentments bubbling to the surface, and times when it seemed like they were taking 2 steps back for every step forward. But Clara remained committed, drawing strength from her support group, her therapy sessions, and the small victories that each day brought. As autumn gave way to winter, Clara found herself preparing for a milestone she had scarcely dared to hope for, a family dinner with all 3 of her children. The invitation had come from Emma, who had suggested that perhaps it was time for them all to come together, to see if they could begin to rebuild their family bonds. Clara spent days preparing for the dinner, her nerves jangling with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She cleaned every inch of the house, wanting to create a warm and welcoming environment. She pored over cookbooks, determined to prepare all of their favorite dishes from childhood: Ryan's beloved lasagna, Emma's favorite apple pie, and the chocolate chip cookies that had always brought a smile to Michael's face. On the evening of the dinner, Clara stood in her kitchen, smoothing down her apron and taking deep breaths to calm her racing heart. The doorbell rang, and for a moment she froze, overwhelmed by the significance of the moment. Then, gathering her courage, she went to answer the door. Emma stood on the doorstep, a tentative smile on her face. "Hi, Mom," she said softly, stepping forward to give Clara a brief hug. "Something smells good." Clara felt tears prick her eyes at the simple gesture of affection. "I'm so glad you're here," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Come in, come in." Ryan arrived next, his posture still slightly stiff but his eyes warmer than they had been in years. He handed Clara a bouquet of flowers, mumbling something about remembering that she liked tulips. Clara's heart swelled at the thoughtful gesture, a sign that perhaps her son was beginning to open his heart to her again. Michael was the last to arrive, looking nervous but determined. He carried a small, wrapped package which he thrust into Clara's hands almost shyly. "It's not much," he said. "Just something I thought you might like." Clara unwrapped the gift with trembling fingers to find a framed sketch, a beautiful rendering of their old family home, the one they had lived in when the children were small. "Oh, Michael," she breathed, tracing the lines of the drawing. "It's beautiful. Thank you." As they gathered around the dining table, there was an initial awkwardness, a sense of uncertainty about how to navigate this new terrain. But as the meal progressed, the tension began to ease. They shared memories of happier times, laughed at old family jokes, and gradually, the warmth of familial love began to seep back into the room. There were difficult moments, too. At one point, Ryan brought up a particularly painful memory of a missed school play, his voice tight with old hurt. Clara listened, acknowledging his pain without becoming defensive, and apologized sincerely for her past failures. "I know I can't change the past," she said, looking each of her children in the eye. "But I want you all to know how deeply sorry I am for the times I wasn't there, for the moments I missed. I'm so grateful that you're giving me this chance to be part of your lives again." As the evening drew to a close, Clara felt a sense of hope blossoming in her chest. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward pauses and moments of tension, but it was a start. As she hugged each of her children goodbye, she felt the bonds of family beginning to strengthen once more. In the weeks that followed, Clara worked tirelessly to nurture these fragile new connections. She made a point of reaching out to each of her children regularly, not just with phone calls or texts, but with thoughtful gestures that showed she was paying attention to their lives and interests. For Emma, she sent a care package filled with art supplies and a note expressing how proud she was of her daughter's creative talents. For Ryan, she surprised him by showing up at one of his company softball games, cheering from the sidelines and beaming with pride as he hit a home run. And for Michael, she spent hours researching graphic design trends so she could engage in meaningful conversations about his passion and career. As winter melted into spring, Clara found herself planning another family gathering. This time, a picnic in the park, where they had spent so many happy weekends when the children were young. As they spread out blankets on the grass and unpacked the picnic baskets, Clara marveled at how far they had come. Emma was laughing, her head thrown back in genuine mirth as Ryan recounted a funny story from work. Michael was showing Clara his latest designs on his tablet, his eyes shining with enthusiasm as she asked thoughtful questions about his creative process. As Clara looked around at her family, she felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. The journey had been long and difficult, filled with painful self-reflection and challenging conversations. But here they were, together again, rebuilding the bonds that had once seemed irreparably broken. That evening, as Clara sat in her study reflecting on the day, she realized that her definition of success had fundamentally changed. The awards and accolades that had once meant everything to her now paled in comparison to the joy of reconnecting with her children. She picked up her journal, a habit that had become an essential part of her healing process, and began to write. Today, I experienced true wealth. Not the kind that can be measured in dollars and cents, but the richness of family, of love, of genuine connection. As I watched my children laugh and share and simply be together, I realized that this moment, this feeling, is what I've been searching for all my life. I am so grateful for this second chance, for the opportunity to redefine success on my own terms. As spring bloomed into summer, Clara's transformation continued. Her volunteer work at the shelter had evolved into a leadership role, where she used her business acumen to help the organization secure funding and expand its services. She found a deep sense of fulfillment in using her skills to make a tangible difference in people's lives. Her relationships with her children continued to strengthen. There were still occasional bumps in the road, old hurts that resurfaced, moments of misunderstanding. But they were learning to navigate these challenges together, with open communication and mutual respect. One warm evening in late June, Clara received a phone call from Emma that would mark another milestone in their journey of reconciliation. "Mom," Emma said, her voice a mixture of nervousness and excitement, "I have some news. I'm pregnant." Clara felt her heart swell with joy. "Oh, Emma," she breathed, tears springing to her eyes. "That's wonderful news. How are you feeling?" As Emma shared her fears and hopes about impending motherhood, Clara listened with rapt attention, offering words of support and encouragement. When Emma hesitantly asked if Clara would be willing to be present for the birth, Clara felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. "I would be honored," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for wanting me there." The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Clara threw herself into preparations for her first grandchild, determined to be the kind of grandmother she had always wished she could be as a mother. She attended birthing classes with Emma, helped decorate the nursery, and spent hours researching the latest in baby care techniques. As Emma's due date approached, Clara found herself reflecting on her own journey into motherhood. She remembered the fear and uncertainty she had felt, the pressure she had put on herself to be perfect. With the wisdom of hindsight and the lessons she had learned through her journey of reconciliation, Clara was determined to offer Emma the kind of support and unconditional love she had failed to provide in the past. The day Emma went into labor was a blur of excitement and anxiety. Clara stayed by her daughter's side throughout the long hours, holding her hand, offering words of encouragement, and marveling at Emma's strength and determination. When the baby finally arrived, a beautiful little girl with a shock of dark hair, Clara felt as though her heart might burst with love. As she held her granddaughter for the first time, gazing into those tiny, perfect features, Clara made a silent vow to always be there for this new life, to love her unconditionally and support her in every way possible. In the weeks that followed, Clara divided her time between helping Emma adjust to motherhood and continuing her volunteer work at the shelter. She found a beautiful balance between her family responsibilities and her commitment to giving back to her community. As summer faded into autumn once more, Clara realized that a full year had passed since that fateful day when she had broken down in her bedroom, surrounded by the hollow trappings of her material success. The woman she had been then seemed like a stranger now, distant, isolated, and desperately unhappy. On a crisp October evening, Clara invited her children over for dinner. As they gathered around the table, baby Sophie cooing softly in her carrier, Clara looked at each of their faces in turn. "I want to thank you all," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "A year ago, I was lost. I had everything money could buy, but I had lost sight of what truly matters in life. You gave me a second chance, an opportunity to learn what real success means. It's not about awards or bank accounts or fancy titles. It's about love, connection, and making a positive difference in the world." Ryan reached out and squeezed her hand. "We're glad you found your way back to us, Mom," he said softly. Michael nodded in agreement. "It hasn't always been easy," he admitted, "but I think we're stronger as a family now than we ever were before." Emma, cradling baby Sophie, smiled through tears. "I'm just grateful that Sophie will grow up knowing her grandmother, the real you, Mom, the you we've come to know and love this past year." As Clara looked around at her family, her children, her granddaughter, the bonds of love that had been tested and strengthened, she felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. She had learned through hard-won experience that true wealth couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. It was found in the warmth of a family dinner, in the soft coo of a baby's laugh, in the knowledge that you had made a positive difference in someone's life. Clara's journey was far from over. There would be new challenges to face, new opportunities for growth and connection. But as she sat surrounded by the love of her family, Clara knew that she had found her true purpose. She had redefined success on her own terms, and in doing so, had discovered a richness of life she had never known before. As the evening wound down and her children prepared to leave, Clara stood in the doorway, watching them walk to their cars. The autumn breeze rustled the leaves, carrying with it the promise of change and new beginnings. Clara took a deep breath, feeling gratitude wash over her for this second chance at life, at love, at family. She closed the door softly and walked back into her home, not a house filled with empty achievements, but a warm, welcoming space alive with memories and the promise of many more to come. Clara picked up her journal and began to write, capturing the emotions of the evening and her hopes for the future. As she wrote, Clara reflected on the long and winding path that had brought her to this moment. She thought of the broken woman she had been, the bridges she had burned, and the hard work it had taken to rebuild them. She thought of the lessons she had learned about love, forgiveness, and the true meaning of success. Clara knew that her journey was not over. There would be more challenges to face, more opportunities for growth, more moments of joy and sorrow to navigate. But she also knew that she was no longer alone. She had her family, her newfound purpose, and a deeper understanding of what truly mattered in life. As she closed her journal and prepared for bed, Clara felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had redefined success on her own terms, and in doing so, had discovered a richness of life she had never known before. With a heart full of gratitude and hope for the future, Clara turned out the light, ready to embrace whatever tomorrow might bring. In the years that followed, Clara continued to grow and evolve. Her relationship with her children deepened, becoming a source of mutual support and joy. She watched with pride as Emma navigated the challenges of motherhood, offering guidance when asked, but always respecting her daughter's choices. Ryan, inspired by his mother's transformation, began to reassess his own priorities, finding ways to balance his career ambitions with a more fulfilling personal life. Michael's design studio flourished, and he often sought Clara's advice on business matters, valuing her experience and newfound wisdom. Clara's work at the shelter expanded, and she became a respected advocate for community support and second chances. She shared her story at conferences and local events, inspiring others who felt trapped by their own definitions of success to seek a more balanced and fulfilling life. As baby Sophie grew into a curious and energetic toddler, Clara reveled in her role as grandmother. She was there for first steps, first words, and countless moments of wonder and discovery. Through Sophie's eyes, Clara saw the world anew, finding joy in the simplest things, and rediscovering the childlike sense of awe she had lost in her relentless pursuit of success. On Clara's 60th birthday, her children surprised her with a family vacation to the beach house where they had spent summers when they were young. As they sat around a bonfire on the sand, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories, Clara felt a profound sense of contentment wash over her. Looking around at the faces of her loved ones, Emma and her husband, Ryan and his new girlfriend, Michael and his partner, and little Sophie building a sand castle nearby, Clara realized that she had achieved something far greater than any business success. She had built a legacy of love, forgiveness, and genuine connection. As the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Clara raised her glass in a toast. "To family," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "To second chances, to growth, and to the endless possibilities that come when we open our hearts to love." Her children and their partners raised their glasses in response, echoing her words. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of family and the beauty of nature, Clara knew that she had finally found the true meaning of success. It wasn't measured in dollars or accolades, but in the love she gave and received, in the lives she touched, and in the moments of genuine connection she shared with those around her. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Clara closed her eyes and made a silent wish, not for wealth or recognition, but for many more years of love, laughter, and the simple joy of being surrounded by family. She had learned through her long and sometimes painful journey that these were the things that truly mattered, the measure of a life well lived. And as she opened her eyes, meeting the loving gazes of her children and the curious stare of her granddaughter, Clara knew that her wish had already come true. She had found her way home, not to a place, but to the hearts of those she loved. And in that knowledge, she found a peace and contentment that no amount of worldly success could ever provide. The end of Clara's story was really just the beginning of a life lived with purpose, love, and a deep appreciation for the truly important things. Her journey from isolation to redemption had taught her invaluable lessons about the nature of success, the power of forgiveness, and the enduring strength of family bonds. As Clara drifted off to sleep that night, the sound of ocean waves in her ears and the warmth of family love in her heart, she knew that whatever challenges the future might bring, she would face them with grace, wisdom, and the unwavering support of those she held dear. Her redefined success was not an endpoint, but an ongoing journey, one of continuous growth, learning, and love. And in that knowledge, Clara found true peace, true wealth, and true success, far beyond anything she could have imagined in her former life. Her story stands as a testament to the transformative power of love, the possibility of second chances, and the profound joy that comes from living a life aligned with one's deepest values and most cherished relationships.